It perfectly mimicked his mother's voice, luring them into the thicket where it smelled of sulfur and rot. Elias froze, his hand hovering over the zipper of his sleeping bag. The fire had died down to a bed of glowing, angry coals, casting long, dancing shadows against the heavy curtain of trees surrounding their campsite. The silence of the Appalachian deep woods was absolute, a heavy blanket that usually comforted him, but now it felt suffocating. "Eli, please. It hurts." The sound did not come from a memory. It came from the darkness, perhaps 50 yards beyond the perimeter of the camp. It was weak, trembling, saturated with the specific, rattling breath of a woman dying of lung cancer. It was the exact sound Elias had listened to for the last 6 months, sitting by a bedside in a sterile hospice room in Ohio, holding a frail hand that felt like dry parchment. But his mother was in Ohio. She was heavily sedated, hooked up to a morphine drip, 300 miles away. She was not in the woods of Tennessee. "Did you hear that?" Elias whispered, his voice cracking. He scrambled out of his tent, his boots scuffing deeply into the dirt. Jared, who was sitting by the embers whittling a stick, looked up. His face was hard, illuminated by the dying red light. He did not look toward the woods. He looked specifically at Elias. "Hear what, Elias? Sit down." "It's Mom," Elias said, the panic rising in his chest like bile. "Jared, that was Mom. Yes, out there. She's screaming." "Elias, stop," Jared said, his voice low and commanding. He stood up slowly, putting himself between Elias and the tree line. "Your mom is in the hospice. We called the nurses this morning. Remember? She is sleeping." "Eli, I'm cold. So cold." The voice drifted through the trees again, louder this time, clearer. It carried the specific cadence of her distress, the way her voice broke on the vowels. It was impossible to fake. The sheer impossibility of it clashed violently with the sensory evidence hitting Elias's ears. His brain short-circuited. Logic told him it was a hallucination, a stress response to the grief he was preemptively mourning. But his heart, the part of him that was a terrified son, screamed that she was alone in the dark. "She's lost?" Elias gasped, grabbing his headlamp. "Maybe she wandered off. Maybe she tried to find us." "That is not your mother," Jared said, grabbing Elias's arm. His grip was bruising. "Elias, listen to me. Do you remember the old man at the trailhead? The one with the wandering eye? Do you remember what he told us about this section?" Elias struggled against his friend's grip. The memory flashed. A dirty, unkempt man at the gas station 3 days ago, smelling of gasoline and old sweat, grabbing Elias's shoulder. "Do not answer the whispers. If you hear what you love, run the other way. The woods are hungry." "Let me go," Elias shouted, shoving Jared. The force of the push sent Jared stumbling back toward the fire pit. "Do not do it," Jared yelled, scrambling to regain his footing. "Elias, it's a trap. That's rule number 1. You do not go off trail at night." "It's my mother," Elias roared, the logic completely severed from his mind. He clicked on his headlamp. The beam cut a sharp, white cone into the oppressive wall of black. He did not look back at Jared. He did not look back at the safety of the tents. He threw himself forward, crashing through the initial barrier of rhododendrons. His mind filled only with the agonizing sound of his mother weeping in the dark. He made his choice. He chose the voice. Behind him, the camp disappeared instantly, swallowed not by distance, but by an unnatural, heavy silence that slammed shut like a coffin lid. Elias ran until his lungs burned, the branches whipping against his face and arms like lashings. He had expected to find her within 100 yards. He had expected to stumble into a clearing and find her in her hospital gown, confused and shivering. But there was only the forest. The terrain grew hostile immediately. The ground, previously firm dirt and pine needles, became soft and cloying, sucking at his boots with every step. The undergrowth thickened, thorns tearing at his tactical pants, snagging his skin. He was panting, sweat stinging his eyes, swinging his headlamp wildly from left to right. "Mom? Mom! I'm coming. Keep talking to me. Eli, why did you leave me?" The voice was directly ahead. It sounded wet, gurgling, as if she were drowning in her own fluids. Elias sobbed, a raw, ugly sound, and pushed harder. He vaulted over a fallen log that felt strangely soft, like rotting flesh, beneath his hand. That was when the smell hit him. It started as a faint trace of rotten eggs, sulfur, but within seconds it escalated into a thick, oily stench of advanced decay. It was the smell of roadkill left in the July sun for a week. It gagged him, coating the back of his throat with a taste like copper and bile. He stopped, bracing his hands on his knees, dry heaving. "Mom," he wheezed. "Come here, baby. Come to mommy." Elias stood up, wiping slime from his mouth. Something was wrong. The voice, it had changed. The pitch was perfect, the timbre identical, but the intonation was sliding. It was too smooth, too rhythmic. The pain in the voice was being replaced by a subtle, vibrating excitement. He swept his light around. The trees here looked diseased. Their bark was peeling in wet, gray strips, revealing pale wood underneath that looked disturbingly like bone. The canopy above was so dense it blocked out the stars, pressing down on him like a ceiling in a basement. He checked his GPS watch. Dead battery. He checked his pocket compass. The needle was spinning lazily, refusing to settle north. "Okay?" Elias whispered, the first true tendrils of terror wrapping around his gut. "Okay, turn around. Just go back." He turned 180 degrees, aiming his light back the way he had come. There was no path. The thicket of thorns he had just hacked through was gone, replaced by a wall of ancient, gnarled oaks that looked like they had stood undisturbed for centuries. "Do not go." The voice was not ahead of him anymore. It was to his left. He spun around. The beam caught nothing but leaves. "Stay with me." Now it was to his right. Close. Intimately close. "Mom?" Elias whimpered, backing up until his spine hit the rough bark of a tree. "Eli, Eli, Eli." The voice began to fracture. It multiplied. It was not just one voice anymore. It was a chorus of them, all sounding like his mother, but warping. Some were crying, some were screaming in agony, and some, the ones that made his bladder loosen, were giggling. A low, wet, throbbing giggle that bounced off the trees, making it impossible to pinpoint the source. His headlamp flickered. Once, twice. The white light turned a sickly yellow, dimming to a candleless glow. The darkness rushed in, emboldened. He was surrounded. The smell of sulfur grew so intense his eyes began to water, blurring his vision. He realized with a sickening clarity that he had not been running toward his mother. He had been herded, like cattle. Elias clicked the headlamp off and on, praying for the battery to hold, but the light died completely. He was plunged into absolute crushing blackness. He fumbled for the backup flashlight on his belt, his fingers trembling so violently he dropped it. He heard it hit the soft, wet ground, but when he reached down to grab it, his hand touched something that was not plastic or metal. It was a foot, a bare, cold, human foot. Elias recoiled, scrambling backward on his hands and feet. A scream caught in his throat. He jammed his hand into his pocket and ripped out his lighter, flicking the wheel. The small flame erupted, casting a feeble, dancing orange glow. He held the lighter up. Standing less than 10 feet away, in the shadow of a massive blight-stricken chestnut tree, was a figure. It was hunched over, its spine curved at an impossible angle. It wore tatters of fabric, shreds of flannel and denim that looked like they had been ripped from hikers decades ago. "Mom!" Elias whispered. The word escaped him before he could stop it. The posture, the frailty. It looked exactly like her silhouette in the hospital corridor. The figure did not move, but the voice came from it. "Eli, help me." It was perfect. It was her. The hope, irrational and parasitic, surged again. Elias stepped forward, the lighter burning his thumb, but he did not care. "Mom, how did you get here?" He reached out. His trembling fingers brushed the shoulder of the figure. The skin was unnaturally cold, clammy, and coated in a thin layer of viscous oil. The figure turned. Elias did not scream. His mind simply rejected what he saw, freezing his vocal cords. The thing had no face. Where eyes, a nose, and a mouth should have been, there was only a smooth, pale expanse of taut, wet skin, like the belly of a dead fish. In the center of the face, where the mouth should be, was a single, ragged hole. It was not a mouth with lips or teeth. It was a sphincter of torn flesh, pulsating rhythmically. From that hole came the sound. "My sweet boy." The sound did not match the movement of the flesh. It was a recording, projected from deep within the creature's gullet, amplified by the hollow chambers of its skull. Elias stared into the abyss of that hole. The smell of sulfur and rot was pouring from it, a physical wave of heat. And in that moment the chemistry of his brain aligned. The pheromones. The old man had warned him about the air in the bad valleys. The smell was not just decay, it was a hallucinogen. The creature secreted it. It used the scent to confuse the prey, to lower inhibitions, to make them hear what they desperately wanted to hear. The creature raised a hand. Its fingers were elongated, with too many joints, ending in black, curved nails that dripped with the same oily substance. It reached for Elias's face, the voice shifting from a plea to a shriek of predatory excitement. "Found you." The illusion shattered. The mother was gone. There was only the predator, and Elias was standing within arm's reach of a biological nightmare that had evolved to hunt the grieving. The creature lunged. Elias threw himself backward, the lighter flying from his hand and extinguishing in the mud. He hit the ground hard, rolling through the slime and thorns. The creature shrieked, a sound that was no longer human, but a high-pitched, grinding frequency that vibrated in Elias's teeth. "Run." Every instinct in his primate brain screamed at him to scramble up and run blindly into the dark. To scream, to fight. But as he clawed at the dirt, the old man's words from the trailhead resurfaced, cutting through the panic like a knife. "They are blind to the eye, son. They see with heat, they hunt by sound, and they feast on the chemicals of fear. If you scream, you re-dinner. If you run, you re-prey." The creature was thrashing in the brush a few feet away, its limbs flailing, trying to locate the source of the movement. It hissed, and the sound was the voice of Jared, then the voice of Elias himself, distorted and mocking. Elias stopped. He forced his body to go rigid. He pressed his face into the rotting mulch of the forest floor. He shut his eyes tight. He held his breath. The fear was a physical pressure in his chest, threatening to explode his heart. He needed to gasp for air. He needed to whimper, but he clamped his jaw shut until his teeth cracked. "I am a stone," he told himself. "I am a log. I am dead." The creature moved closer. He could hear the wet slap of its feet on the mud. He could hear the wheezing intake of air through that terrible hole in its face. It was sniffing. It stopped directly over him. Elias felt a drop of cold slime land on the back of his neck. The smell of sulfur was overwhelming, burning his nostrils. The creature was tasting the air, searching for the spike of adrenaline, the rapid heat of a fleeing victim. The voice of his mother drifted down, inches from his ear, soft, pleading. "Eli, are you hiding? Do not hide from mommy." A tear leaked from Elias's eye, mixing with the dirt. He did not move. He did not breathe. He pushed his mind to the hospice room, to the silence of the morphine drip, to the acceptance of death. He deadened his own terror by embracing the void. The creature lingered for an eternity. It nudged his boot with a claw. Elias remained limp. Finally, the creature let out a frustrated, chittering sound. The pheromones dissipated slightly. It could not distinguish him from the forest floor without the trigger of panic-fueled movement. Turned away. Elias lay there for hours. He lay there until the sulfur smell faded to a dull background note. He lay there until the black sky began to turn a bruised purple. Only when the birds began to sing, Real birds, terrified and tentative. Did Elias move? He crawled. He did not walk. He crawled on his belly, shivering violently, following the faint slope of the terrain upward. It took him 2 hours to cover what had been a 10-minute run. He broke through the tree line and collapsed onto the hard-packed dirt of the trail. Jared was there. He was sitting by the cold fire pit, holding a flare gun, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. When Elias dragged himself into the light, Jared dropped the gun and rushed over. "My God," Jared whispered, recoiling as he touched Elias. "You smell like death." Elias could not speak. He looked at his hands. They were covered in the black, oily residue from the creature's skin. He looked at the woods. The sun was rising, casting beautiful golden shafts of light through the trees, making them look innocent and majestic. But Elias knew. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He turned it on. One voicemail. From the hospice. He pressed play, holding the phone to his ear with a trembling hand. "Mr. Vance." The nurse's voice was gentle. "We're so sorry to call you with this news. Your mother passed away peacefully at 2:00 a.m. this morning." Elias closed his eyes. 2:00 a.m. The exact time he had heard the scream. He looked back at the dense, green wall of the forest. The creature had not just mimicked her voice. It had heard her soul leave the world, caught the echo of her death scream across the ether, and used it as bait. Elias felt the phantom sensation of the cold slime on his neck. He knew he would leave these mountains, go home, bury his mother, and try to live a normal life. But he also knew that for the rest of his life, whenever he was alone in the dark, whenever the wind blew through the trees just right, he would not hear the wind. He would hear her, and he would wonder if she was truly gone, or if a piece of her was still out there, trapped in a throat of rotting flesh, wandering the dark forever. Elias did not scream. He just stared into the trees, and for a split second, from deep within the shadows, he heard the soft, wet sound of a giggle.